Hey guys, so today I've made a really fun tier list going over every single pitcher that played in the 2020 MLW season. Let me make clear that this is just for the 2020 season and not all time. So even if you think there's a pitcher who played really well this season or is a legend of the league and you think they got snubbed, this is not for all time. It's just for the 2020 season. Please let me know of what you think of my own rankings just in the comments. The tier list is going to be linked in the description so you can make your own. Also, if you could hit the like button, subscribe, that would be really great. I can do some more content like this. Let me preface this by saying that I'm not going to be dunking on people for having a bad season or for people who are just not traditionally seen as pitchers in the MLW. That's not what I'm here to do. It's difficult to be a pitcher in the MLW. And the teams that do have good pitchers are really successful. If you just look at the Wildcats and the Eagles, Daniel Schultz and Kyle Schultz are such quality pitchers. And so that's what you need in order to be successful in this league. So in the 2020 season, we saw a lot of different pitchers, some really good, some not so good. And so let me take some time to explain the rankings. At the bottom, we have emergency pitcher. This category is for guys who only pitched a few times. Some of these guys are not pitchers and I understand that, so I'm not going to be bashing them for not knowing how to pitch. This was a position they were put in, hence why they're going to be an emergency pitcher. They just pitch to get the 3 outs. The next is C tier. This is for guys who can really pitch, but they either had a bad season with good pitching or had a lot of unfortunate breaks with a lot of home runs. C tier has good pitchers. Anybody who can complete a game or start or get a win in the MLW is a good pitcher in my eyes. But, this year statistically, or for whatever reason, this is not their year. B tier is the go-between between an okay pitcher in C tier and a great backup in A tier. These guys are pretty good backups. They may give up a lot of runs, but you really have to respect them, otherwise you will get struck out. Pitchers in B tier are not someone who is a superstar at pitching, but you really have to respect them, otherwise you will pay the price. In A tier, these are your guys who had a solid year pitching. These can also be a great backup, a breakout year for a rookie, or a star who has fallen from grace. These guys are consistently good at pitching and they're pitching well. S tier are people who have had exceptional years. They've had a lot of great games, but I can't justify putting them any higher. For instance, they either had a bad postseason, or they may have not had some great games, or there's just something that's holding them back from being in a higher tier. These guys are great, and they had a massive impact on their team's success. The last tier is double S tier. These are the legends of the seasons. These are probably my front runners for the MVP. You have to specifically game plan for these guys. They have phenomenal stats. They have a good arsenal of pitches. They've proven this season that they are at the top. So, with all that out of the way, let's jump into the list. First up, we got Alec Warda in B tier. Warda started off the season well, recording 5 Ks and only allowing 2 earned runs. This was due to some great plays on defense from Swanson that got Warda off the field. He wasn't always painting the zones, but he was definitely throwing good pitches and sitting batters down. I think he wins this game if he gets some help on offense. Warda only pitches 2 games after, and statistically speaking, his numbers went down. However, in the game against the Cobras, all of the runs came before the first out. I don't know if he wasn't warmed up, but he was just not sitting batters down like he was in his earlier games against the Eagles. However, Warda looked solid, giving up less walks and only giving up 2 hits the rest of the game. His team was able to deliver on offense and secured him the win. In his last game, he pitched against the Gators. He still had trouble finding the zone. It's hard for him to come from a game not pitching and then having to follow up Ryan Cratched. Warda gave the Predators a shot at winning every time he was on the mound. The 2 teams that Warda pitched against made the playoffs, and the other one was a solid dub against the Cobras. So needless to say, it wasn't Warda's best statistical season, and he struggled hitting the pipes, but he really was a solid backup, and he was playing against really good teams. Next up is Andy Durand in emergency pitcher. Andy Durand, in my mind, is an emergency pitcher for the Cobras because he doesn't always have the best control over the ball. Durand really only has one kind of pitch. You'll see it in the highlights. It's kind of this drop ball coming over the plate. And so unless he's hitting the zone or catching them off guard, he's really not going to be able to sit batters down because he's throwing the same pitch over and over again. His first appearance was to save Sean Flynn from the decimation the Mallards were giving the Cobras. He gave up a run, a walk, and striked out McPeak, who had a .54 on base percentage, so that wasn't a bad first outing. However, his next two pitching outings are probably something he wants to forget. He had a solid first inning against the Wildcats and only gave up a hit and a walk. But Duran gave up 7 straight walks and could not define the pipes in the second inning. Flynn came in and gave up another 3 runs, and this led to Duran having an 18 ERA for the game. In the Metro Magic game, he just got ripped apart, giving up 8 walks, 8 runs, and 8 hits. He couldn't hit the zone, and when he was on target, the Magic were just getting hits. Right before he got pulled, he spiked the ball. In that case, it doesn't seem like Duran really likes pitching. It's more of the case that he had to pitch for the Cobras because of their lack of a second pitching arm. So in my mind, that is why Duran is an emergency pitcher category. He's not really a pitcher when it comes down to it, but he definitely has to, and he has some skill when it comes to it. Ben Wilson, emergency pitcher. Ben Wilson only recorded 1 out in an inning of pitching, which is actually more than some people did on this list. He led up 2 hits against the Gators and did not record a strikeout. He got subbed in after making that absolutely amazing catch in their 16-0 routing of the Gators. Obviously, it was for memes and, just for him to get the last out because he deserved that. I didn't see much from his highlights, but at least he didn't let anybody score. So that's why he sits in emergency pitcher. Bix Beaton, emergency pitcher. Bix Beaton started off with a nice strikeout against the Diamondbacks. Not a bad start, but unfortunately he got into the 3rd inning and gave up 10 runs, 7 walks, and 6 hits. Bix does not have a ton of velocity on his throws. When he's not walking the batters can easily read him and take him yard. The Gators were helpless since they didn't have any more substitutes and Jorgensen was in quarantine. I think under normal circumstances, Bix is not even a pitcher for the Gators, and so that is why he's at the bottom of the emergency pitcher tier. Brendan Jorgensen is an S tier. Jorgensen had a breakout year in the league. During the year, Jorgensen posted some insane numbers. So out of pitchers who pitched 14 or more innings, he was 3rd and last in runners walked. He was last in hits allowed. He had the 2nd best ERA. He had a 3rd best whip. I mean, the man was on fire. He posted 4 shutouts, 1 against the Preds, 1 against the Wildcats, and 2 against Mallards. Oh, and 2 of those shutouts were no-hitters. He was also on track to shut out the Wildcats until a walk-off home run was hit in the bottom of the 3rd. He may have not been striking them out, but he was getting it done on the mound. And if it weren't for a solo home run against the Eagles, he would have had a perfect game. The craziest part is the man only had 4 wins on the year. Crazy great regular season. However, in the postseason, he did cool off a little bit. He had a 2.25 ERA, 2.34 whip, only 29 Ks, 3 dubs, 2 losses. I mean, not bad stats, but when it came down for crunch time for the Gators, they had Cheatham in the clutch, which does bring him down a little bit in my eyes. However, without Jorgensen, the Gators don't even win the championship. Every batter had to earn their win against him, and that's why I'm putting him in S tier. Brendan Zerlag is in C tier. In 2019, Brendan Zerlag was a whipping boy for batters, but due to his managerial greatness, or luck in the draft, he was able to avoid pitching for the most part of the season. He played 1.5 innings versus the Diamondbacks. He got some strikeouts and some good outs. However, I think the problem for Zerlag lies in the fact that he is read pretty easily. He has a good throwing motion, velocity, and torque on the ball, but I don't see a ton of pitches in his arsenal that keep batters guessing or scared. I'm not sure if he thinks of himself much as a pitcher, but I definitely see him as a great fielder and batter. I think he definitely is more of an emergency pitcher due to his experience, but he definitely has to make some improvements in his game if he ever wants to be a really good pitcher. Chris Cheatham, double S tier. He was the World Series MVP for a reason, and there's no reason to deny him what he deserves. Although I was hesitant to give him the double S tier because it was his rookie year, the stats don't lie. Chris Cheatham only pitched 6 games in the 2020 season, but was only 1 inning behind Jorgensen in terms of pitching. 2 of his games went into extras. The only really big struggle he had all season was against the D-backs with 5 earned runs, which was more than he gave up the other 5 games the entire season. Plus, the Diamondbacks were on a huge momentum swing, so I don't blame him. Among pitchers that played 14 or more innings, he was 4th in ERA, led in whip, second in walks given up, and third lowest hits given up. He was basically step for step with Jorgensen in the season. Oh, and he also got a perfect game on top of that. When playing with the Gators, when you switched pitchers, you had to be honest with them. You couldn't take a break. You had another ace who's going to be dealing the entire game. I think the Gators show how a two-pitcher system is going to be successful in the future of the MLW. Cheatham is the prime example of why you need more than one pitcher. Just look at him in the playoffs among pitchers with 9 or more innings. He led an ERA, led in WHIP, had the least amount of walks, and was undefeated going in the postseason and 4-0. Also, fun fact, the only other person to do that in the modern era of MLW with 9 innings or more is Ryan Kratz, who went 5-0. Cheatham is undoubtedly in the double S tier, and I can't wait to see how he does in the future. Clayton Price, A tier. Even though Clayton didn't play many games this year due to his injuries, imagine what happens when there's a healthy Clayton Price for the Eagles. He went 3-0, 1.0 ERA, 1.33 WHIP, and he only gave up 5 hits. He was 1 walk away from a perfect game against the Preds, had a 1-hitter shutout against the Diamondbacks, and still found a way to get the dub against the surging Magic. I think if Clayton is healthy, he would have been an easy S tier and maybe even a double S tier depending on how the season happened. I think it's sad what happened to him, but I'm glad that he's okay, and hopefully he can come back to do better in 2021. Clayton Price pitches more games. He's going to be great for the Eagles, and the Eagles go farther. Daniel Schultz, S tier. Another year goes by, and it's another year that Daniel Schultz is robbed of the rings that he deserves. The Eagles have been runner-ups for 4 years and only got 1 championship, which is a travesty. Daniel Schultz put us up another great statistical season. He went 5-5, but posted a 1.46 ERA, 1.69 WHIP, and was 3rd in strikeouts with 83. The man was the workhorse for the Eagles, putting up some great numbers, and Schultz had a solid season in the playoffs. But again, they just didn't make it to the finals. His stats were fine, but they weren't great. Nothing compared to the rest of the pitchers that played 9 or more innings. He worked hard all year, but just some reason can't find himself in the playoffs. I think that's what holds me back from giving double S tier to him, but he's definitely a staple of the league, and I hope the Eagles come back healthy and hungry for a dub next year. Drew Davis, A tier. This may be a controversial pick for some people, but even with the Cobras' woeful season, there is no reason that Drew Davis should be below an A. Here are his stats. Among pitchers with 14 or more innings during the 2020 season, he gave up the most runs, he gave up the 3rd most hits, he gave up 59 walks, and he had the worst ERA. And you may say, ha, he should be lower. But ladies and gentlemen, he helped the Cobras get 4 wins this season. And the Cobras would have not gotten those wins if it were not for Drew Davis. A lot of inflation comes from specific games. The Magic when they scored 9 runs, and the Wildcats when they scored 8 runs. However, he posted no-hitters against the D-backs. He had 2 one-hitters, and the man in all of his games did everything in his powers to keep his team in the game. And maybe he didn't have the best statistical season like Schultz or Cheatham, but he basically kept his team in the playoff race until the end. And that's why Drew Davis deserves A tier. Gavin Areski, C tier. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Imagine being such a good manager that the comments turn against you and want you to give your team over to the new rookie. Gavin Areski is rattled. I don't think he's a bad pitcher. He has great motion, he has great velocity, and he has great movement on the ball. It just seems that everybody else is able to pick him apart. He only played 3 games, and 2 of them were against the Cobras. 1 of them was against the Eagles. I'd say he would play a really good game against the Eagles. I'm not exactly sure what happened to him, but I still think he has a lot of potential to develop. He just needs a little more time in practice. He's been in a tough spot for a little while, but I think if he wants to bring it back, he can. I think he fit well in a team like the Cobras, since they already have a great amount of run support. I think he'd be a great addition in pitching as a second pitcher. A poor man's snake to a rich man's snake, if you will. Gavin Areski is highly underrated in the league, and I think if he just has enough support, he can definitely do something. Jack Agner, emergency pitcher. Jack Agner is solidly in the emergency pitcher tier. Jack Agner went 0-2 as a starter with an ERA of 6.60, a 5.20 whip, 23 walks, and only 7 Ks. Agner struggled hitting the strike zone for the most part of his games. He lacks a lot of control over the ball. It's like he knows what he wants to do, but he can't get the right technique for it. Keep practicing, Jack. Hopefully you can develop some pitches for next season. Magic fans are definitely wishing for a good second pitcher in the draft. James Swanson, C tier. Swanson performed about on par with Warda in terms of ERA. It doesn't seem that Swanson got a lot of chances in the lineup, and when he did, he just played okay. He has a great pitching motion and great velocity. Swanson has a great pitching motion and great velocity. It just seems that he didn't have a ton of adjustment time in the league. He played well on defense. It just seems that his batting slump is the culprit for his absence. Hopefully he can get more playing time in the future so he can improve. I think he has a lot of potential in the league if he keeps practicing. Jason Chadwick, A tier. Jason Chadwick was my sleeper pick for Rookie of the Year, but I think Cheatham has taken that away from him. Chadwick had a season full of ups and downs. It's kind of funny when you look back at the games. One game he'd shut out a team, and then the next his ERA would be sky high. He went 3-6 on the season, but he always was super solid on the mound. It took a little time for him to settle in, but I think he's going to have a great 2021 season. Even this season, Chadwick was second in strikeouts, had a respectable ERA of 1.83, had a better whip than Tommy Coughlin, and pitched 36 innings. He had a no-hitter against the Eagles, had a one-hitter against the Prez. I think Chadwick can become something great in the MLW. He has a ton of potential, and I expect big things out of him. I will say I wanted to put him in S tier, but just his stats and some other things are holding me back from doing so. One thing he needs to do is bring down his walks. He led the league in walks, but he can definitely improve on that. And the other thing is his postseason performance was a little underwhelming. He was facing it off the Preds, which are a really tough team, but I know that he'll come back, and hopefully he has a better 2021 season. Jimmy Norp, A tier. Jimmy Norp is another rookie with another solid season. He was super solid as a pitcher, eventually transitioning into the main starter for the Diamondbacks. Norp was really consistent and reliable the entire season. His stats include a 1.80 ERA, a 1.92 whip, 54 Ks. Norp was the energy for the Diamondbacks. He gave the team life to what appeared another struggling Diamondbacks season. But he led them to a great stretch and put them in the playoffs. Although he did not perform statistically the best in the postseason, the Gators really had to earn every run in those games. He had a great rookie season and definitely earned a spot in A tier. Jonah Heath, B tier. Jonah Heath had a breakout season in the MLW. Joining right around at the turn of the season for the Diamondbacks, he went 3-0 with them. Although his stats are not groundbreaking, in the 9 innings he pitched, he got a 2.33 ERA, 21 Ks, 24 walks. Now I think with the momentum that the D-backs had, these numbers are really solid. But he's got to cut down on the walks, and he's got to cut down on the runs. I think without the walks, Heath gets a way better stats for the season. But it's good to see the D-backs have a solid number 2 pitcher. If Heath continues with his upward trajectory, I think the D-backs can be a big force in their division next season. Josh Lucier, C tier. What a roller coaster journey for this man. Getting bounced around from team to team and eventually getting a waiver wire call-up on the last game of the season against the Gators. Lucier gets the start for the last game of the season and loses to a perfect game, 1-0. Lucier pitching style does not have a lot of speed. He has an eephus in the arsenal, but he does some great stuff with that. He's not a guy that's going to strike you out, but he's putting the ball in a specific position for the batter to swing at. He's giving up 3 hits against a very good Gator squad. However, because of the lack of play time this season, I don't think I can give him above a C. So he's at the top of C tier, but I definitely want to see, hopefully, some use from him in the future. I don't think he'll get a lot of playing time with the Eagles, but hopefully he can find a place somewhere. Kyle Schultz, double S tier. consistently at the top of the league, and it's no surprise that Kyle Schultz finds himself here again at the top of the list. Kyle Schultz posted 5 shutouts, and 4 of those are one-hitters. He went 8-1, and he led the league in ERA, posted 75 Ks, had a 1.68 whip. And you fear having to face the Wildcats because you know you're going to have to go against Kyle Schultz for 6 innings. The man was a beast during the season, making easy work of the division all the way to a bye week in the playoffs. Kyle did struggle a little bit in the playoffs, but the only reason is because the man had to do it all on offense and defense. I mean, it was a slugfest every single game, and I'm sure the man was tired. The Wildcats definitely need some run support in the playoffs. It didn't help that Nick Saylor was injured and Ryan Kelly was in a slump against some of the best pitchers in the league. Kyle had a great season and he has nothing to hang his head on. Liam Jackson, B tier. I think Liam Jackson's numbers don't speak for the way he played this season. He had a 4.58 ERA on the season, a 2.61 whip, and he only had 14 Ks. However, Liam Jackson helped get 2 clutch wins against the Cobras. He played some great games against the Wildcats and struggled against the Preds. Before a rookie, coming to pitch halfway through the season, I was really impressed with him. I think he's definitely in the middle of B tier, below Warda. He has some good pitches in the arsenal. I think he'll definitely improve in the 2021 season, but I need some more from him before I can put him as a really good backup. I would definitely try and get a backup pitcher just in case Liam Jackson does flounder a little bit, but I hope that he does really well next season. Mason Jewell, emergency pitcher. Now, you may be thinking, when did Mason Jewell ever pitch during the season? Well, Mason Jewell pitched the last game in the series versus the Cobras, and he led in 4 runs on 4 straight walks. And it's unfortunate because it looked like he could throw a little bit, but he just never hit the zone. He never returned to pitch, so I guess that's the last time we'll see him pitch. That is why he's going in the emergency pitcher category. But maybe with some time he can develop something. I have no idea. Max Tamalka, emergency pitcher. You may have forgotten about who exactly Max Tamalka is. He was the Eastern Eagles draft pick this season, drafted as a pitcher to maybe help with the issue of the injury of Clayton Price. Unfortunately, Max was unable to play for most of the year, and the only time he did pitch, he did not look good. He gave up 6 walks and a grand slam with no outs. Just a really rough transition in the first game of the season pitching. And after that inning, he got pulled. Hopefully you can get some rust off of him and show him exactly why he was drafted, but for now, he's going in emergency pitcher. Michael Aguilar, C tier. Michael Aguilar had a pretty rough season in terms of trying to get on the field. He got traded to the Wildcats and only got a couple of starts. His first start was really bad, and he just got picked apart by the Diamondbacks. However, in his second start against the Preds, he shut them out until the extras. It's just really unfortunate that the lack of offense from the Wildcats lost him that game. Hopefully Aguilar finds a spot in the Wildcats roster. He's got some good pitching, and if he can pick up his 2019 batting form, he'll be a really good pickup for the Wildcats. Neil Smith, emergency pitcher. Neil Smith goes into the top of the emergency pitcher category. He came in a very tough spot versus the Mallards and got a 1-inning shutout. But the next inning he came in and due to some fortunate defense and some walks, he gave up 4 runs. But I think he did a good job given the circumstances and played pretty alright. Nothing outstanding, but he got the job done, and that's why he's going at the top of the emergency pitcher tier category. Nick Saylor, B tier. Nick Saylor is a good pitcher despite his lackluster starts. In my mind, he goes 4-1 if Kratch does not sub in the second, versus the game against the Preds. He was dealing for the most part against the Preds, and he played lights out against the Magic. He was rusty against the Gators, who picked him apart in the first game of the season, and played pretty well against the struggling Cobras. He had a 3.21 ERA, a 2.07 whip, and a 24 Ks. As a second pitcher to Kyle Schultz and pulling out 3 wins shows that he can still get it done. It's a solid year for Nick Saylor, and that is why he gets into our B tier. Ryan Kratch, double S tier. Kratch had another amazing season in 2020. He pitched more innings than any other pitcher and was third in ERA, had 8 wins, led the league in strikeouts, and was second in whip. Plus, he put his team on his back in the playoffs. In the playoffs, among pitchers with 9 innings or more, he was second in ERA, tied for first in strikeouts, and second in WHIP. Although some may disagree with him basically walking Kyle Schultz 6 times in a row in the playoffs, strategically and logically speaking, it was the right move. He was picking his battles and spots and striking people out the entire season. Cratch is a super talented player, and he showed that all season. He put the team on his back, and he led the Preds to 4 shutout victories this season. Hats off to the Preds, and hopefully they can get back into the finals next season. Sean Flynn, C tier. Sean Flynn had a rough season compared to 2019. He almost doubled his ERA and only got 1 win against a struggling D-back squad. Sean Flynn is by no means a bad pitcher. It just seems he put himself into holes with walks this season, and then he couldn't work himself out of those holes. He's got to be able to work the strike zone more consistently. That way he can give up less runs as a whole. An ERA of 6.48, a WHIP of 4.57, and only 16 Ks is not something he wants to repeat next season. Sean Flynn is a great hitter, so he either needs to improve his pitching or the Cobras need to get a pitcher in the draft. Tommy Coughlin, A tier. A solid season for Coughlin. I think anybody else in the league would love to have his stats as a pitcher. 2.07 ERA, 2.11 WHIP. However, Tommy has fallen off in the league in terms of his production. In 2017 and 2018, he led the league in ERA. 2019, he was 4th, and in 2020, among those who pitched in 14 innings, he was 3rd to last. He really played well against the Gators, even though they did get swept. He had a no-hitter against the Magic and easily dismantled the Cobras. Tommy struggled against the Eagles and was able to limit the damage after 5 runs in the 2nd inning. He came back the next game and threw a no-hitter against the Eagles, which was really impressive. However, it did scare me with the performance against the D-backs. They lost the first game and then subbed himself out for Bonham after loading the bases, and then did not play the game 3. Bonham was only able to stop runs after letting 3 come in. I think the Mallards had a really good season despite not making the playoffs. I think Tommy underperformed compared to where he's been in the past 3 years, but I think the Mallards are going to come back hungry and ready for next season. I predict they make the conference finals next year. Trevor Bonham, A tier. Trevor Bonham is the most underrated pitcher in the MLW. Trevor Bonham had a great season this year, pulling out some clutch wins for the Mallards. I wanted to put him in S, but I just can't justify it due to the fact that Jorgensen is also there and just had a way better stats as a rookie. Bonham was a great backup to Tommy Coughlin this year. He gave up no runs in 2 innings against the Gators, and he had a no-hitter against the Eagles. He picked up a solid win against the Cobras, and he finished the season with an ERA of 1.59, 50 Ks, and a 1.99 WHIP. All of these stats are super close to Jimmy Norp. So if we say that Jimmy Norp had a great year pitching, Trevor Bonham also had a great year pitching. I hope the Mallards continue to build next season, and I look forward to the improvements. Well guys, that's going to bring us to the end of the video. Let me know what you think of the tier list. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? Make sure you follow the socials in the description and also consider subscribing. If you're not aware, there's an MLW subreddit and MLW's Discord. You should consider joining them, and there's a great community there. And with that, guys, thank you so much for watching the video. I should have a batting tier list coming out probably in 2 weeks. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later.